My wife moved out of the house, without a word. 2 weeks later, I discovered her dark secret. You won't believe what happened when my wife just vanished without a word. I woke up one morning to find the love of my life gone, and 2 weeks later, I was hit with the biggest betrayal of my life. But here's the real twist: you won't expect how I made them pay. Stay tuned and see how this crazy story ends. Trust me, you're in for a wild ride. I woke up to silence. At first, I thought it was just one of those mornings. You know, the kind when you wake up a little earlier than usual, and the house feels still, almost like it's holding its breath. But something was off. I stretched, trying to shake the fog from my mind, thinking maybe Sophia had gone for a run. Or maybe she'd stepped out to grab coffee. She did that sometimes. But then I noticed it. The quiet was too thick, too unnatural. Usually, I could hear her moving around, humming as she made her coffee, the sound of her running water in the bathroom. But this time, nothing. Just pure, unbroken silence. I rubbed my eyes and sat up in bed, scanning the room. Her side of the bed was empty, the sheets smooth as though she'd never been there. My heart skipped. I couldn't explain why, but the air felt heavier, like I was holding my breath. I swung my legs off the bed, my feet hitting the cold hardwood floor, and I stood up. Every step I took felt like it echoed louder than it should. I checked the bathroom first. Empty. No sound of the shower running, no scent of her shampoo. The bathroom mirror was fogged up from last night's use, but other than that, it was just still. Too still. Next, I went to the kitchen. Her coffee mug was still on the counter, half full, untouched. Her shoes weren't by the door. Her coat wasn't hanging over the chair like usual. Panic crept up on me slowly, threading through the tension in my chest. This wasn't normal. I started to walk faster, checking room after room, my pulse picking up with each empty space. The closet. Half of it was empty. Her side of the closet gone. I froze. She was gone. Everything that belonged to her had been taken. The jewelry drawer was open, but there was nothing inside. Her favorite framed picture, the one from our anniversary, was missing. I couldn't breathe for a second, just standing there in the middle of the empty bedroom. The walls closing in. My phone. I grabbed it, desperate for something, anything that would explain what the hell was going on. I scrolled through our last texts. They were normal stupid little things, like "what do you want for dinner?" or "I love you." But nothing that screamed, "I'm leaving." Nothing that hinted she was planning this. I scrolled back further, looking for some sign that I had missed. Something. Nothing. My hands were shaking when I dialed her number. It went straight to voicemail. No surprise there. I didn't even leave a message. What could I possibly say? I sat down on the edge of the bed, my mind spinning. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe she had just gone out for a while. But no, every second that passed, the hole in my stomach got bigger, deeper. This wasn't an accident. She hadn't gone to get coffee or run errands. This wasn't something she'd done before. I stood up and walked through the house again, checking everything. Hoping there was some mistake. Hoping I'd find a note somewhere, something explaining why. Nothing. It was like she had just vanished into thin air. I pulled open every drawer in the kitchen, the ones where she usually left sticky notes with reminders. Where she always kept our grocery list. Empty. The fridge, the dining table, the nightstand, nothing. She wasn't just gone, she was gone. The first feeling that hit me was confusion. And then the gut punch of devastation followed right after. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the confusion or the emptiness. I kept walking through the house like I was in a fog, checking places I already knew weren't going to give me any answers. The last place to look was the garage, but I didn't even bother. I already knew. I don't know how I knew, but I did. I stood at the door for a moment, staring out the window at the empty driveway. Her car was gone. I sat back down on the couch, my mind racing. How could this happen? How could she just leave without a word? No explanation, no fight. We weren't perfect, but we had been us. I loved her. We had been together for years. How could she throw all that away like it didn't matter? I could feel the anger building inside me, bubbling up to the surface. The anger was better than the confusion, though. The anger felt like I could do something about it. I reached for my phone again, just to make sure I didn't miss anything, any message, any sign that she was coming back. But then my phone rang. I looked at the screen. and my heart skipped a beat when I saw the number. It wasn't her. It was a number I didn't recognize. A sick feeling dropped in my stomach. I didn't want to answer, but I couldn't stop myself. I hit answer. Hello? A pause. Then a voice I didn't recognize, smooth and way too casual. Hey, Liam. Hope I'm not interrupting your pity party. My heart was pounding in my chest. I recognized that voice now. Derek. The bastard was calling me. Who the hell is this? I managed to get out, my voice a little shaky. He laughed. That awful, smug laugh. The name's Derek. Thought I'd introduce myself properly, since Sophia didn't bother to. My mind went blank. Derek. What the hell? He was living in my house. The house I had worked my ass off for. The house she had just moved into with him. I just wanted to let you know, Derek went on, practically gloating. She's doing great. Doesn't miss you at all, if that's what you were wondering. Something snapped inside me. My breath hitched in my chest, and I could feel the heat of rage building up in my throat. But I swallowed it down. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my cool. What do you want? I bit out, my voice steady, even though my insides were screaming. Oh, nothing much, Derek said, like it was all just a joke. Just thought you'd like to know how well things are going for us. The house is nice. Real nice. Thanks for setting it up so perfectly. We're really making it our own. I could hear him going on about redecorating and all the things they were doing in my house, but I wasn't listening anymore. All I could think about was how they were living in my house. The one I had built. The one I had spent years making a home. And they thought they could just walk in, like they owned it. Like I didn't even matter. I knew I had to do something. And I knew exactly what it was. Derek, I said, cutting him off, my voice calm, almost amused. Do me a favor. Oh yeah. What's that? He sounded smug, like he thought he had already won. Check the house deed again. A beat of silence on the other end. I could almost hear him processing the words, the realization hitting him. Then, before he could respond, I hung up. My heart was still racing, but this time it wasn't from panic. It wasn't from fear. It was from a cold, calculated fury. They had no idea what was coming. I couldn't shake the image of Derek's smug voice echoing in my head. The bastard had the nerve to call me, rub my face in his new life in my house. The house that I had worked my ass off for. I couldn't let that go. I wouldn't let it go. I had already been through the shock, the confusion, the raw pain of it all. But now, the anger had taken hold. And it wasn't just about Sophia anymore. It wasn't just about what she had done to me. It was about them. It was about how they had both thought they could walk all over me. Like I was some kind of fool who wouldn't fight back. The moment I hung up the phone with Derek, a part of me felt like a weight had been lifted. But it wasn't relief. It was clarity. I knew exactly what I needed to do next. There was no more room for confusion, no more space for wondering. I was going to take back what was mine. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about control. It was about showing them that I wasn't the man they thought I was. I wasn't going to roll over. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I grabbed my laptop and started digging. I wasn't the kind of guy who just reacted emotionally. No. I was a planner. I needed facts, information, something solid I could use. I wasn't going to make the mistake of rushing into something without being completely sure. I pulled up the property records for the house, the one I'd spent years maintaining. I was the one who had worked every weekend, every holiday, putting time and money into making that place perfect. And now Sophia and Derek were sitting in it like it was their own, without a care in the world. They didn't realize how badly they'd messed up. They didn't realize that they had walked right into a trap. The moment the property records loaded, I felt the satisfaction of knowing I was right. Sophia's name wasn't anywhere on the deed. She had no legal claim to the house, none. It was mine. It always had been. And as for Derek? He was nothing more than a squatter, a guy living in my house, using my stuff. Like he was entitled to it. I felt a dark smile spread across my face. They had no idea what was coming. I knew I had to be smart about this. I wasn't going to let my anger dictate my actions. No, I had to think this through. I needed to hit them where it hurt. And that meant hitting them legally, hitting them financially. If they thought they could just waltz into my life and take everything without consequence, they were wrong. I wasn't about to let them destroy everything I had worked for. I wasn't going to let Derek get away with this. He thought he could just walk away from his past and start fresh, but I was about to make sure that didn't happen. The first thing I did was call Marcus. I trusted him. He was the kind of guy who knew his stuff, who didn't waste time. When he picked up the phone, I didn't even bother with pleasantries. I just got straight to the point. Marcus, the first need your help. I need to take action, and I need to do it right now. There was a brief pause on the other end. I could tell he was already thinking, already putting the pieces together. This about the house? He asked, his voice sharp. Yeah, it's time. I'm going to hit them with everything I've got. I leaned back in my chair, my mind already spinning with plans. I want them out. I want to make sure they know they've messed with the wrong guy. Marcus chuckled. You're not going to leave them any room to breathe, huh? Not a chance, I said. They've been too comfortable. It's time to shake things up. All right, here's what we'll do, Marcus said, already in lawyer mode. We'll start with a formal notice to vacate. The house is in your name, so they have no legal claim to it. We'll give them 30 days to get out. And trust me, that's plenty of time for them to realize they're not going anywhere but out the door. I nodded. This was it. This was the first step. But I wasn't stopping there. I want to make sure Derek feels it too. I'm not just going to kick them out and be done with it. I want to hit them with damages. Unauthorized modifications to the property, utilities that haven't been paid, the general destruction of the place. They've messed it up, and they're going to pay for it. You got it. I'll draw up the papers. And I'll start digging into Derek's financials. He's already made a ton of mistakes, and we'll use that against him. I leaned forward, my eyes narrowing as I pictured Derek's smug face when he realized what was happening. Good. I want him to panic. I want him to know that he's not as untouchable as he thinks. The next few hours were a blur of emails, phone calls, and paperwork. Marcus was moving fast. By the time the evening rolled around, I had the notice to vacate in hand. It was official now. Derek and Sophia had 30 days to leave. But I wasn't stopping there. I knew the real damage wouldn't come from just kicking them out. The real damage would come when I hit them with the financial blow. They would pay for what they had done to my house, and for what they had done to me. I had a plan. I knew how to execute it. And now, all I had to do was wait. I felt the familiar buzz of anger rise in my chest again. But this time, it was controlled. I wasn't just angry. I was calculating. I was going to make them regret ever thinking they could get away with this. The next morning, I woke up early, my mind already working through the next steps. I made a list of things I needed to do: call the utility companies, cancel services, start working on the legal side of things. I wasn't just going to kick them out of my house. I was going to make sure they had nowhere to turn. I called the water company first. Shut it off, I said. I don't want them to have anything. Next was the electricity. Cut it, now. I said the same thing to the gas company, the internet provider. Everything they relied on to live in the house was about to be gone. I wasn't playing around anymore. They had invaded my space. Now, I was going to make sure they couldn't enjoy 1 second of it. When the notice was officially delivered, I could feel the tension building inside me. I was playing the long game now. They had no idea what was coming, but soon, they would. I wasn't just taking back my house. I was taking back my life. By the time Derek called again, I was ready. His voice on the other end of the line was frantic. What is this? The notice to vacate? What the hell do you think you're doing? I could hear the panic in his voice, and it only made me smile. It's called justice, Derek. Something you're clearly unfamiliar with. You can't do this, he spat, his words sharp. This isn't over. I chuckled, leaning back in my chair. Oh, it's over, Derek. You just don't know it yet. The line went dead, and I knew it was only a matter of time before he started scrambling. He had no idea what he was up against. But I did. I was ready for whatever he threw at me. And when the dust settled, I'd be the one standing tall, looking down at the wreckage of their arrogance. I knew I had to make my move. But here's the real question: should I expose them publicly and make them regret their actions? Or should I take them down legally, piece by piece, and make them feel every bit of the damage they caused? What do you think I should do? Should I go public or hit them with the law? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Comment 1. If you think I should expose them, comment 2. If you think I should destroy them legally. Let's see who gets it right. It was time to get serious. The first few hours after Derek's call had been a rush of adrenaline, but now I was in control. I could feel it in my bones, the kind of clarity you get when you finally step out of the fog and see exactly what needs to be done. I wasn't just going to let Derek and Sophia get away with it. They thought they had won. They thought they could walk into my life, tear it apart, and walk away scot-free. But I wasn't some passive victim waiting to get crushed. I was going to hit them where it hurt. They hadn't even realized yet, but the clock was ticking. I didn't waste a second. I grabbed my laptop, started going through the property records again, double-checking everything. I wasn't the type to leave anything to chance. When you're in a fight like this, you don't just take what's handed to you. You fight smart. I started digging through the legal details of the house. I knew every inch of it. I knew the property like the back of my hand. The land, the layout, the materials, it was all in my name, all legally mine. Sophia, she'd been too wrapped up in picking out wallpaper and planning dinner parties to even care about the paperwork. She hadn't even looked at the deed. She never cared. And now, it was going to come back to bite her in the ass. The next step was simple. I needed to take back control. I wasn't going to let some guy who'd waltzed into my life like he owned it just push me aside. Derek thought he could just move in, take what was mine, and forget that there was a real person behind all of it. He had no idea who he was messing with. I picked up my phone, dialed Marcus's number, and waited for the click on the other end. Marcus wasn't just any lawyer. He was the kind of guy who didn't waste time. He got things done. And right now, I needed things done. I needed to make sure that Derek didn't think he could just walk away from this without facing the consequences. Marcus, the first said, my voice steady. I'm going after them. I need you to make it official. Let's get the eviction papers ready. I need them out of my house. He didn't hesitate. We'll do it right. I'll start the paperwork, but we need more than that. You want to make sure they can't come back, that they don't just take it and run? Absolutely, I said, already seeing the next step in my head. I want to hit them with damages. Unauthorized changes to the property, unpaid utilities, the destruction. It's going to hurt. I want them to know that this isn't just about kicking them out. This is about making sure they can't take another step without feeling the weight of it. Marcus was quiet for a beat, then he laughed. I knew you'd be all in on this. All right, we'll move fast. I'll have everything filed, and we'll make sure they don't get away with this. I hung up the phone, a smirk pulling at my lips. I felt good. I felt like I had a plan, and this time, I was the one with the power. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't going to beg for answers. I was going to take control. The next few hours flew by as I worked with Marcus to get the paperwork sorted. Eviction notices, financial claims, everything. I wanted to make sure they knew I wasn't going to be some pushover who just sat back and let them do whatever they wanted. I wasn't going to let Derek walk away without consequences. And Sophia? She was going to learn that you can't just leave someone behind without paying the price. I called the utility companies next. I wasn't leaving anything to chance. I needed to make sure Derek and Sophia felt the heat. I wasn't about to let them live in my house, enjoying the luxuries that came with it, without paying for it. I called the water company first. Shut it off, I said. I don't want them to have anything. I could practically hear the confusion on the other end of the line. But I didn't care. I had made my decision, and they were going to feel it. Next, I called the electricity company. Cut it. No power. Not a single light in that house. The woman on the other end didn't ask questions. She just processed the request. And that's what I needed. Things were moving, and I could feel the pressure building. Derek and Sophia wouldn't know what hit them. I wasn't done. I called the internet provider and had that cut too. Let them sit in the dark. Let them realize that they had no control anymore. Let them feel what it was like to have everything they thought they could take from me ripped away. By the time the eviction notice was ready, I felt the rush of satisfaction. They were going to be served, and they weren't going to have time to fight it. I knew Derek would probably try, but that was exactly why I was pushing through this so quickly. I needed to break them down before they had a chance to regroup. When the knock came on the door, I was waiting for the moment when Derek would finally realize that he had messed with the wrong guy. I imagined his face when he saw the papers, confused at first, then angry. Then, maybe, a little bit afraid. Because he knew He knew deep down that there was nothing he could do to get out of this. And when that realization hit him, that's when he'd start to crack. But I wasn't going to be there to see it. I didn't need to. I didn't need to be the one to rub it in his face. No, I was going to do something better. I was going to watch him lose everything, slowly, methodically. And when it was all over, when the dust had settled, he wouldn't just be out of my house, he'd be out of my life. And that was something I was looking forward to. By the time I'd hung up the phone with Marcus, I could feel my pulse still racing. The hard part was over, right? I'd set the wheels in motion. I had the law on my side, the paperwork was being processed, and soon enough, Derek and Sophia would be out of my house. No questions asked. But I wasn't going to leave it there. I wasn't just going to let them walk away from this like nothing had happened. No. This wasn't just about getting them out of my house. It was about hitting them where it hurt. I wanted to make sure Derek and Sophia never forgot what they'd done. And that meant making them pay not just for breaking the trust, but for the arrogance they'd shown. They'd thought they could just swoop in and steal everything, treating me like I was some kind of joke. I wasn't having it. I had to be smart. I had to hit them in ways they wouldn't expect. And I knew exactly where to start. I wasn't going to waste time with just the eviction. That was step one. Now, it was time for the real fight. I pulled up my bank records, staring at the numbers as my mind clicked into place. They'd been living in my house, using my utilities, like they had every right to it. I'd been paying for everything, taking care of the bills, the maintenance, and they'd been living there without even a thought about who was footing the damn bill. Well, now they were going to feel the sting. I went through my list of utility companies, starting with the basics: water, electricity, internet. I wasn't just going to stop at having the services cut off. I wanted to hit them with more than just inconvenience. I wanted them to pay for every little detail, every small mark they'd left on what was mine. I called the water company first. "Shut it off," I said, voice calm but firm. "I don't want them getting one more drop out of it. I want them out, all the way out." The woman on the other end hesitated for a moment, probably trying to figure out why I was so insistent, but it didn't matter. She didn't need to know the details. I just needed it done. And it would be. Next, I moved to the electricity. I wasn't just cutting the lights off. I was cutting off everything. I wanted them to sit in the dark, to feel the weight of their choices. I wanted them to understand that their little paradise in my house was about to collapse. "Cut the power," I told them, effective immediately. "I don't want a single light in that house until they're gone." The woman didn't question me, just processed the request. A small part of me felt satisfaction at how easy it was. This was how it was supposed to feel. The power shift was in my hands now, and I wasn't giving it up. The internet was the next thing I had to deal with. I wasn't about to let them sit there, scrolling through their social media, pretending they were living some fairy tale life in my house. I called the provider and requested the same thing. "Shut it off. I don't want them to have anything. No more streaming, no more Netflix." It felt good, really good, to take that power back. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I had let them take from me without a fight. I wasn't making that mistake again. With those calls made, I focused back on the legal side of things. I wasn't going to just sit back and wait for things to fall into place. I had to stay ahead of them. I pulled up the legal documents Marcus had sent me, looking over every detail. I needed to make sure they couldn't get out of this. The notice to vacate would be delivered within 24 hours. And once it hit, they'd have no choice but to leave. But that wasn't enough. I had to make sure that when they left, they didn't take anything from me. I'd spent too long building this life to let them walk away with anything they didn't deserve. Marcus was right there with me, helping to draft the papers for the damages. He understood exactly how this needed to go. Unauthorized changes to the property, unpaid utilities, the way they had treated everything like it was theirs. This was about more than just a house. This was about showing them that they couldn't just walk into my life and tear it apart without consequences. They were going to feel the weight of their actions, no matter how much they tried to deny it. The whole time, my mind kept going back to that moment when Derek called me, when he laughed and rubbed it in my face, thinking he had the upper hand. I could almost hear his voice in my head again, smug and self-assured. He thought he could make it his. He thought I wouldn't care. But what he didn't know was that this was just the beginning. It was time to play the long game. to make sure they understood that no matter what they took, I was going to take it all back, piece by piece. I stared at the eviction papers, feeling the weight of the next step. Once those were served, it would be real. But even after that, there was still more to be done. They didn't get to walk away clean. Not after everything they'd done. I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. When it was all over, when they were out and gone, I'd still be standing here, taking back what was rightfully mine. This wasn't just about winning. It was about making sure they understood who they were messing with. And they were going to pay for every single mistake they'd made. I could feel the heat in my chest as I sat there, staring at the piles of paperwork in front of me. I wasn't just going to let Derek and Sophia get away with this. They'd thought they could just stroll into my life, tear everything apart, and walk away with it like they owned it. But I wasn't some guy who was just going to sit back and let them take what was mine. No. I was going to make them pay. Not just for the house, but for the betrayal. For the arrogance. They had no idea what they'd gotten themselves into. The moment the eviction papers were filed, I felt like I'd taken the first real step in regaining control. But that wasn't the end of it. Hell no. They were about to feel the full weight of their actions, and I wasn't going to stop until they did. The house had always been mine, but they treated it like it was theirs to ruin. Derek had moved in like he had every right to be there, dragging Sophia along with him. It was almost laughable how comfortable they'd gotten, how they thought they could live in my space, breathing my air, using my stuff, without a care in the world. They didn't know it yet, but their time was up. I wasn't just getting them out. I was hitting them where it hurt. I'd already had the utilities shut off water, power, internet. They thought they could live comfortably while they laughed at my expense? Not anymore. I wasn't going to let them enjoy the fruits of my labor, not after everything they'd done. But that was just the beginning. I'd had enough. They didn't just have to leave. They needed to pay for the destruction they'd caused. For every nail they'd driven into the house without permission. For every single change they'd made without so much as asking. It wasn't just about the house. It was about making them feel the consequences of their choices. I made sure Marcus understood exactly what I wanted to do. He was more than just a lawyer. He was my way to make sure this didn't just go in my favor. It went the way I needed it to. I wasn't just going to kick them out. No. I was going to make sure they lost something. Something they'd feel. I wanted damages. I wanted them to see that they couldn't just waltz into my life, take what they wanted, and walk away without facing the consequences. Unauthorized changes to the property, unpaid bills, the destruction of everything I had worked so hard for. That was my plan. I wasn't letting them get away with it. I called Marcus again, my mind already racing ahead, thinking about how quickly this was all moving. The notice was on its way, but I wasn't slowing down. Get everything ready, I said, my voice tight with determination. I want them to feel this. I want them to know that they can't just walk away without paying for what they did. Marcus was quick to respond. He knew I wasn't playing around. He promised to have everything in place, and he wasn't wasting time. He understood what I wanted. He was ready to make sure Sophia and Derek would never forget what they had done. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I didn't just want them to leave. I wanted them to understand that they couldn't just steal my life and walk away without paying the price. I wasn't going to let them think they could come into my home, act like they owned it, and get away with it. No way. They'd done enough damage, and now it was my turn. I was sitting at my desk, looking at the legal papers, imagining the looks on their faces when they realized what was happening. When it hit me, this wasn't just about getting them out of my house. This was about taking back what was mine. My home. My life. I wasn't going to sit by and let Derek walk away thinking he was the winner here. He'd taken enough. He had crossed a line that I couldn't just forget. It was time to hit him where it hurt. I wasn't just going to take the house back. I was going to make sure they understood the cost of this. As I thought about everything that had happened, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I had a plan, and it was working. It wasn't just about throwing them out or making sure they left. This was about sending a message. I wasn't some fool who'd let them tear my life apart. I had control, and I wasn't going to let them take it from me again. They were going to pay. They had no idea how hard it was going to hit them. They thought they'd already won, but they hadn't seen the half of it. The next step was clear. I wasn't just waiting for them to leave. I was going to make sure they knew they'd lost. They'd never get away with this. Not while I had a say. The thought of Derek sitting there, watching everything he thought he had built crumble, made a dark grin spread across my face. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. They had no idea who they were dealing with. And when the dust settled, they'd be left with nothing, while I walked away with everything I had earned. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I wasn't just going to let them leave and move on with their lives like nothing had happened. No, Derek and Sophia were going to feel the consequences of their actions. And I wasn't going to stop until I made sure they did. The house wasn't just a building. It was mine. It had been mine before they ever thought they could step foot in it. And it was going to remain mine long after they were gone. They hadn't just taken my home. They'd taken my trust, my peace, everything I'd worked for. And now, I was going to take it all back. I had already made sure the legal steps were in motion. Marcus had assured me the papers were filed and that everything was lined up. The eviction notice would be delivered any day now, and once it was, they'd have no choice but to leave. But I wasn't just going to sit back and wait. That wasn't my style. I had already taken the necessary steps with the utilities cutting off their water, power, and internet, but that wasn't enough. It didn't feel complete. I needed to go further. I needed to make sure they knew they weren't walking away from this unscathed. I kept thinking about how Derek had so casually moved in. How comfortable he had gotten with Sophia at my expense. How they both acted like they had a right to my space, my life, like I was some kind of afterthought. It made my blood boil just thinking about it. I wasn't some weak fool who could be brushed aside. No, I was going to take control. And I was going to make them regret ever thinking they could pull this off. The next thing on my mind was the damage they'd done to the house. I could picture it, Derek moving in, dragging Sophia along, changing things without asking, treating everything like it was theirs. It was more than just the eviction. It was about making them understand that their actions had consequences. I wanted to hit them where it would hurt the most, their wallets. I wasn't going to let them just walk away without facing what they'd done. So, I reached out to Marcus again. We needed to make sure that when this was all over, they couldn't come back and try to weasel their way out of it. I wanted them to feel the financial blow. We need to go after the damages, I told him. The words sharp, deliberate, unauthorized changes, unpaid bills, the destruction, everything. I want them to know it wasn't just about getting them out. It's about paying for everything they've taken from me. Marcus didn't hesitate. We'll file for damages and get the ball rolling. They'll be lucky if they walk away without facing anything more serious. His confidence was exactly what I needed. We weren't just going to take the easy route. I wanted them to pay for every little thing, every change they'd made to my home, without my permission. Every moment they'd spent in that house, living like it was theirs, was a moment I was going to take back. I wasn't stupid. I knew Derek would try to fight back. He'd try to make this harder than it had to be. Maybe even try to make it all my fault. I knew he'd try to twist the story, but I wasn't going to let him. This wasn't just a matter of the house, it was about my life, my dignity, my control. I had earned everything I had, and I wasn't going to let him walk away without feeling the full weight of the mess he'd made. The thought of Derek getting served the notice, of seeing the panic in his eyes when he realized he couldn't just keep living in my space, made a dark smile tug at my lips. He thought he could outsmart me, that he could just take what he wanted and leave me in the dust. But he was wrong. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I was going to enjoy this. Not just the revenge, but the satisfaction of seeing him squirm. The satisfaction of knowing he'd made the biggest mistake of his life by underestimating me. But it wasn't just about him. It was about Sophia too. She'd thought she could leave without any consequences, that she could walk away from me without a second thought. She thought Derek would be her savior, but he wasn't. And now, she was going to have to face the reality of what she'd done. She was going to have to deal with the fallout, just like Derek. She was going to understand that when you walk out on someone, there's a price to pay. I took a deep breath, letting the silence of the house settle around me. Everything felt different now. I wasn't just a guy whose life had been turned upside down. I was the guy who was taking it back. And when all was said and done, they would both understand what it meant to cross me. The house, my life, it was all coming back to me. They'd taken everything they could, but now? Now it was my turn. The day I had been waiting for had finally arrived. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. The notice to vacate was on its way, and I knew the moment it hit their door, things would change. But I wasn't just sitting around waiting for the inevitable. I had already planned out the next move. This was no longer about them just leaving. It was about making sure they understood the consequences of their actions, making them feel the weight of the mess they had created. Derek and Sophia thought they were untouchable, that they could waltz into my life and take what they wanted without any pushback. But I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Not now. Not ever. I sat at my desk, the paperwork in front of me, the weight of everything I was about to do pressing down on me. This wasn't just a fight for a house anymore. It was a fight for my dignity, my peace of mind. Every second that passed felt like a ticking clock, the countdown to when everything would come crashing down on them. I wasn't going to give them any more chances. Derek thought he could make a fool out of me, thought he could walk into my space like he owned it. He had no idea what was coming. I checked my phone again. The eviction notice had been served. It was done. They didn't have anywhere else to go. The house was mine, and they would be out. I couldn't help but feel a small rush of satisfaction at the thought of Derek, sitting there in my house, realizing that his time was up. But it wasn't enough. I couldn't just leave it at that. I had to do more. I had to make them feel it. I thought about that call with Derek again, the way he'd mocked me, how he'd made it clear that he thought he had won. He thought he could take everything I'd built and just toss me aside, like I was nothing. But now, it was my turn. I wasn't going to let him just waltz out of this unscathed. No. He was going to pay for every moment he'd spent in my house. Every second he'd lived in my space, pretending like it was his, like he was entitled to it. I wasn't the kind of guy to react impulsively. I wasn't going to go in guns blazing, letting anger rule my actions. No, I was smarter than that. I'd already made sure that everything was in motion, utilities shut off, damages filed. Now, I just had to wait for the pieces to fall into place. And when they did, Derek would finally realize the mistake he'd made. The phone rang. I didn't even need to look at the screen to know who it was. Derek. He'd been quiet for a while, probably trying to figure out what to do next. I didn't pick up right away. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of hearing me scramble, of letting him think he had any control. But after a few seconds I answered, my voice calm, steady. Hello? There was a slight pause on the other end, before Derek's voice came through. It was no longer the cocky, self-assured tone he'd used before. This time, there was a hint of panic in his voice. Liam, he said, like he was testing the waters, we need to talk. I leaned back in my chair, the corners of my lips curling up into a small, knowing smile. This was it. He knew the walls were closing in, and he was trying to figure out how to save himself. I don't think there's anything left to talk about, I said, my voice cool and collected. You've made your choices, Derek. Now you have to live with them. He let out a frustrated sigh, the sound of his desperation cutting through the phone. You don't have to do this, man. I've already made it clear, I'm out. I'll be gone. You'll get your house back. Just drop the charges, all right? I shook my head, the satisfaction building in my chest. No, Derek. This isn't about the house anymore. This is about the fact that you thought you could just waltz in and take everything I worked for without facing any consequences. And now, you're going to pay for it. I could hear him growling through the phone, the sound of him shifting, trying to maintain control. This isn't over, he said, his voice cracking. You think you can just ruin me over a house? Over a woman? I laughed, the sound dark and low. You don't get it, do you, Derek? I leaned forward in my chair, the weight of my words pressing down on him through the phone. It's not just about the house, or Sophia. It's about you thinking you could take everything from me and walk away without even a second thought. You're not the one who gets to decide how this ends. I do. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear Derek's breath coming in sharp, quick bursts. He was trying to save face, trying to figure out a way out. But he had no way out. Not anymore. Finally, he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't have the money for this, Liam. I can't fight this. Good, I said, the finality in my voice clear. You're going to wish you'd never crossed me. I hung up the phone without waiting for a response. There was nothing more to say. I'd made my point. Now, it was time to watch everything they'd built come crumbling down. I wasn't done yet. They hadn't seen the worst of it. Not by a long shot. The days that followed felt like a slow burn, each one stretching longer than the last. I wasn't just sitting around twiddling my thumbs while waiting for them to pack up and leave. No, I was playing a game now, and I was in control. Derek and Sophia thought they could just take what was mine and walk away without any consequences. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. I wasn't just reclaiming my house. I was making sure they'd regret ever stepping into my life, thinking they could tear it apart without paying the price. They'd messed with the wrong guy. The paperwork had been filed, the utilities were cut, and the eviction notice was on its way. Everything was set in motion. The walls were closing in on them, but I wasn't going to stop there. I could almost feel the tension building in the air, every second that ticked by getting closer to the moment when everything would come crashing down. I had planned this out. I had made sure they couldn't escape, couldn't wiggle their way out of the mess they'd made. The worst part for them? They didn't even know what was coming. I kept thinking back to that call with Derek. The way he'd laughed in my face, thinking he had control. He thought he could move in, take over my space, and just walk away with it like it was his. But he was wrong. This wasn't just a house, it was my life. And the fact that they thought they could take it from me, without even blinking an eye, was almost laughable. They had no idea the kind of fire they were messing with. Every time I thought about what they'd done, I could feel the anger building again. The thought of Derek sitting there in my house, like he was entitled to it, made my fists clench. How could they be so arrogant? The more I thought about it, the more it fueled the fire inside me. This wasn't just about getting them out of my house. It was about making sure they paid for every inch of it. Every moment they spent pretending they had a right to what I had worked for. But I wasn't just reacting out of anger. No, I was playing this smart. I had already pulled the right strings, getting the utilities cut off, having the damages filed, making sure the eviction notice was in place. I had built the framework, and now, all I had to do was let it unfold. But I knew I had to be patient. This was the moment of truth. Derek would realize it soon enough. He would feel it all slipping through his fingers, and there would be nothing he could do about it. The phone rang again, cutting through my thoughts. I didn't need to check the caller ID this time. I knew who it was. Derek. It had only been a few days, and already, I could hear the panic creeping into his voice. I wasn't going to pick up right away. I didn't need to. He was going to have to sit with the fact that he was losing. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. But after a few seconds, I answered. Hello? My voice was calm, even. Like I had all the time in the world. There was a long pause before Derek's voice came through, much different than it had been before. It wasn't the cocky, arrogant tone I had gotten used to. This time, he was shaky, desperate. Liam, listen, he started, his voice tight. I don't know what's going on, but this isn't right. We just want to get out of here. Can't we work something out? I leaned back in my chair, a slight smile tugging at my lips. He was panicking. He could feel the pressure mounting. And I loved it. He thought I was going to feel sorry for him, that I'd give him some kind of break. But that wasn't going to happen. You had your chance, Derek, I said, keeping my voice even. You don't get to just walk away from this. You don't get to take what's mine and leave without facing the consequences. I don't have the money to fight this, man, Derek stammered. I can't do it. We can just go. You'll get your house back. We'll be out of here. I let his words hang in the air for a moment. This wasn't about the house anymore. It wasn't even about money. It was about respect. They thought they could walk all over me, and now they were going to pay for it. No. Derek, I said calmly, it's not that simple. You don't just get to run away from your mistakes. You've already taken enough from me. And now, I'm going to make sure you pay for it. You think you can just disappear and everything goes back to normal? Not happening. His voice cracked, the panic clear in his words. I didn't want any of this, Liam. You gotta understand. I didn't, but I didn't need to hear any more of his excuses. You made your choice, Derek. And now, you'll live with it. You've taken everything you can from me, but you won't walk away clean. I'm going to make sure of that. There was a long pause. The silence on the other end of the line felt heavy. Derek knew I wasn't bluffing. He knew this wasn't just about kicking him out of my house anymore. This was about sending a message. You can try to fight it all you want, Derek, I said, my voice low, but the words carrying the weight of everything that had been building up. But I've already won, you've already lost. And you'll never be able to fix what you've done. He didn't answer. The line went dead, and I sat there, staring at the phone for a moment. It wasn't over yet, but I could feel it. I could feel the shift. Derek was realizing, piece by piece, that he was losing. Everything he thought he could take from me was slipping away, and now, he had no choice but to face it. The moment of reckoning was coming, and I wasn't going to stop until I saw him and Sophia pay for everything they'd done. This was just the beginning. I had been waiting for this moment for weeks, but when it finally came, I wasn't sure what I expected. The house had been silent for days, almost too silent. I could feel the tension in the air every time I walked through the rooms, every corner of the place a reminder of what I was about to do. They thought they could walk into my life, take it apart, and leave with everything I'd worked for. Derek thought he could just step into my home, make it his own, and pretend like he hadn't completely overstepped. But now, the tables were turning. Now, they were going to understand what happens when you mess with the wrong guy. I had been patient. I had played the long game. I wasn't one for rash decisions or sudden outbursts. No, I was smarter than that. Everything I had done up until now, getting the utilities cut off, having the eviction notice sent, and filing for damages, had been calculated. Every move had been deliberate, like chess pieces slowly moving toward checkmate. And now, as I stood there, the final move was about to fall into place. They had no idea what was coming. They had no idea that their comfortable little life in my house was about to come crashing down. The call with Derek earlier had confirmed something I'd been feeling for days. He was panicking. He could feel the walls closing in. He had made the mistake of thinking he could walk away without facing any consequences. But now, he was beginning to realize that wasn't going to happen. He could hear it in his voice, the way he stammered and struggled to find words. He knew, deep down, that he had underestimated me. He thought I was weak, that I wouldn't fight back, but he was wrong. And now he was going to pay for it. The more I thought about that call, the more I relished the idea of him realizing just how badly he'd miscalculated. Derek wasn't the one who got to decide how this ended. I did. The house felt different that morning, quieter than usual, like everything was holding its breath. I walked through each room, taking in the space that I had worked so hard to create, the place I had built with my own two hands. The walls were covered with memories of laughter, of arguments, of love. And now, it was all tainted. It wasn't the house I remembered. It had been violated. The walls had seen things they weren't supposed to. And now, I had to take back what was mine. It wasn't just about getting them out. It was about reclaiming my life. I could hear Derek's voice echoing in my head. "You think you've won," he'd said. But he didn't know the half of it. This wasn't about winning. It was about justice. It was about taking control. It was about making sure they knew they couldn't just waltz into my life and tear it apart without facing the consequences. I made the call to Marcus first thing that morning. The final step was in motion, and I needed to be sure everything was handled. I wasn't leaving anything to chance. I didn't trust Derek, and I sure as hell didn't trust Sophia. They had no idea what I had planned. "Marcus, it's time," I said, my voice steady, but beneath it, I could feel the satisfaction building. "I need to make sure they don't just walk away. I want them to pay for everything they've taken from me." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line before Marcus responded. "We're ready to hit them with everything. Damages, lease violations, utilities. They're not going anywhere without facing this." That was exactly what I wanted to hear. The pieces were finally in place. The legal action was moving forward, and I was watching them squirm from the sidelines. Knowing they couldn't escape, I wasn't just getting them out of the house. I was going to make sure they couldn't go anywhere without feeling the weight of their betrayal. I couldn't stop thinking about Sophia. She had been so sure of herself, so confident that she was going to move on and live this perfect life with Derek, like nothing else mattered. She had discarded me without a second thought, like I was just some mistake she could brush aside. But now, she was going to see that life didn't work that way. She was going to see that you can't just walk away from someone you've betrayed and expect there to be no consequences. Derek had his role in this, but so did she. And now, they both were going to feel the sting of it. The phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a text from Marcus. The paperwork had been filed. and the eviction notice had been delivered. It was official. Derek and Sophia had 30 days to leave the house, and they had no way out. I couldn't help but smile as I read the message. It was over. They thought they had won. They thought they could just take what was mine and walk away. But now, they were about to realize just how wrong they were. The days that followed were like watching a slow-motion car crash. Derek and Sophia scrambled to figure out what to do, but no matter how much they tried to run, they couldn't escape the consequences. The house was mine. The damage was done. And there was no turning back. I wasn't going to lie. I enjoyed watching them struggle. Derek's phone calls became more frantic, his voice cracking with desperation. He'd try to make threats, try to sound like he was still in control, but I could hear the fear in his voice. He wasn't the one holding the cards anymore. He wasn't the one who got to decide how this ended. I had him, and he knew it. Sophia, on the other hand, was a different story. She tried to play it cool, tried to act like everything was fine, but I could see through her act. The truth was, she was scared. She had no plan, she had no backup, and she had no idea how to get out of the mess she had made. Every text, every call, was filled with more and more desperation, but I didn't take pity on her. She had made her choices, and now, she was going to live with them. As the days stretched on, I felt the weight of everything I had done start to lift. The tension that had been hanging in the air for so long began to dissipate. I had done what I needed to do. I had taken control back. And now, Derek and Sophia were going to have to face the fallout. They thought they could take everything from me. But in the end, they were the ones who had lost. The final day came, and I drove over to the house one last time. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. Part of me thought I might feel some kind of closure, but as I stood there, staring at the empty house, I didn't feel anything but relief. They were gone, and I had won. The house felt different now, lighter somehow. The weight of everything that had happened, every lie, every betrayal had been lifted. This was my space again. This was my life. And I was ready to move on. Derek and Sophia were nothing but a distant memory now. A chapter that had been closed. I had taken back what was mine, and it felt damn good. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. You think the worst is over? Think again. I didn't just stop at revenge. I made sure they never saw what was coming next. I'm about to hit them where it hurts the most, and you won't believe the payback. So, tell me, how do you think I finally took control of everything? Comment below and let me know if you think they got what they deserved. And if you want more crazy stories like this, make sure you're following me. You won't want to miss what happens next. In life, you can't just let people walk over you, no matter how much they think they can. They might try to take what's yours, your home, your dignity, your peace, but never forget, you always have the power to fight back. Stand up for what you've built, protect what's yours, and never let anyone make you feel like you don't matter. Life isn't just about surviving, it's about taking control and making sure no one can steal your future. Don't let them win.